Hello everyone, I'm Priyadarshini Mahara, faculty at the Department of Buddhist Studies, University of Delhi. Today I'm going to discuss with you module number 34 of paper number 11, Philosophy of Buddhism. This module is entitled as Theory of Karma. Karma is known as karma in Sanskrit and kam as action in Pali. So action is the literal meaning of kam or karma in English. Let us begin with a definition of karma. Karma is the law of moral causation. The theory of karma is a fundamental doctrine in Buddhism. This belief was prevalent in India before the advent of Buddha. If we look back to the historical aspect of the human evolution, we see that since the time human beings started dividing themselves into different groups, be it religious groups or communities, we see that the notion of karma has been prevalent in all these segments of the society. Nevertheless, it was the Buddha who explained and formulated this doctrine in the complete form in which we have it today. The Pali term kam literally means action or doing. Any kind of intentional action, whether mental, verbal or physical, is regarded as karma. When we talk about karma or action, we are not pointing out only to the actions done physically. These actions or karma can be done on the basis of mental thinking as well as emotional feelings. It covers all that is included in the phrase thought, word and deed. When we say thought, word and deed, this particular phrase covers the entire phenomena of karma. It is present in what you are thinking. It is also present in what you are speaking. And it is also present in what you are doing. Generally speaking, all good and bad action constitutes karma. In its ultimate sense, karma means all moral and immoral violations. Involuntarily, unintentional or unconscious actions, though technically deeds, do not constitute karma because violation, the most important factor in determining karma, is absent. So when we talk about the karma, the actions that are being performed, if the actions are performed under the regime of voluntariness or violation, then there is a resultant, or those actions can be termed as good or bad. When this intentionality, when this unconscious action is being performed without any intention or violation, at that moment you cannot term an action to be good or bad. It is this doctrine of karma that the mother teaches her child when she says, "Be good and you will be happy, and we will love you. But if you are bad, you will be unhappy and we will not love you." In short, if it is to be described, karma is the law of cause and effect in the ethical realm. Karma is thus, like everything, in constant flux. When we talk about the law of cause and effect, we are pointing out to the conceptual criteria of the phenomenal existence, which points out to the causality, to the law of causality, or to the cause and effect doctrine. The cause and effect doctrine states that every cause has an effect, and if there is an effect, there has to be a cause for that effect. Now, if you see, then on one hand we have the cause, on the other hand we have the effect. So if there's a cause, then there has to be an effect. And if there is an effect, then it has a cause. So now there's cause and effect, and this effect becomes the cause for some other effect. Are you trying to understand what I'm saying here? We have cause on one hand, we have effect on the other hand, and the effect becomes the cause for the next effect. So there's a cycle that goes around. And here what we are saying is, when there is karma or action, that is the cause and the effect would be the resultants. Now that resultant would further become the cause or action for another effect. So it is more of a cause and effect relationship. Whenever there is any action, there has to have a resultant for that action. And here we are also pointing out to the constant flux. Constant flux tells us that everything is momentary. Everything is kshanik. When we talk about kshanikvad in Buddhism, we point out to the momentariness of the phenomenal existence. Everything is changing every moment. Nothing is permanent, and this change can sometimes be apparent to the eyes, but most of the times it does occur, but it is not apparent to the eyes, because this changing period is less than a fraction of a second. So it takes just the blink of an eye, or maybe less than that, for things to change. Let us take for an example flame of the fire, or when Heraclitus, a Greek philosopher, also talks about the theory of flux, he takes the example of a river. When we say there is a river, we cannot say that this is the same river that I visited a day ago, or an hour ago, or a minute ago, because that river is changing continuously. So he says, Heraclitus, we are talking about here, who is running parallel to what Buddhists have to say in theory of flux. So he also says that you cannot step into the same river again. Why can you not step into the same river again? Because this river is in a constant state of change. Likewise, when we're talking about the human beings, when we are talking about phenomenal existence with material things around, everything is in a constant change. All our actions give rise to certain resultants, and they are always in a motion of change. We create our own present and future by choices we make in each moment. Understood in this light, the teaching of karma does not encourage resignation, but empowers us to become the protagonists in the unfolding drama of our lives. Sometimes we use the word karma to mean the result of karma. For example, someone might say, John lost his job because that is his karma. However, as Buddhists use the words, karma is the action and is not the result. Karma itself cannot be called the result. The effects of karma are spoken of as the fruits or the result of the karma, which means vipak. So when we're talking about karma, it is just the cause. Remember this, do not mistake karma to be the result. Karma and result are different. Karma is the cause and result is the effect, which is also known as vipak. Vipak means fruition, to come into formation. So when there is a certain thing, certain action that is done, and that is when the vipak comes out. That is when the results come out. If you study hard, you're going to get good grades. That is your result. or maturation. If you sow a seed and if you use the actions of giving water on time, providing it with sunlight, proper manure or fertilizers, and other factors which are required, then that tree is going to give good fruits, and that is the resultant. So here karma and result are two different things. Now let us see that there are 4 laws of karma. What are these 4 laws of karma? Results are similar to the cause. So first one states that results are similar to the cause. When I or cause other people harm, I will be harvesting suffering for myself. If it is important to note here that positive actions are defined as actions that have happiness as result. Negative actions are defined as actions that lead to suffering as a result. No results without a cause. So the second law of karma is no result without a cause. If there is no cause, then obviously there is not going to be any result. Then comes the third law of karma, which states that once an action is done, the result is never lost. When we're talking about an action that has been done, then the result is never lost. So, do you know about a bow and an arrow? The moment you leave the arrow from the bow, it moves. You cannot stop it till the time it goes and hits the dart. So, here what we're trying to say is that same thing. Once an action is performed, the result is never lost. So, you cannot hope that in between some macho man comes and holds your arrow and stops it from reaping the result. No, it is going to go hit the dart and the result will be seen. And the fourth law of karma says karma expands. Once we have an imprint of an action in our mind, it tends to be habit forming. As it is often said, killing the first enemy is tough, but after a handful, one quickly loses count and it becomes normal. Also, psychology often stresses a similar point when explaining actions of adults from their childhood experiences. So that is the reason, for that matter, if you can take an example of maybe stealing. So how do people become kleptomaniac? It's obviously a psychological disorder. But the moment when you do your first stealing, you get so used to it. You go for the second one, then you go for the third one, and then you go for the fourth one, and maybe till the time you are caught. And sometimes even after being caught, people continue with it. So that is the reason it's said that karma expands. So this is what we're pointing out by these 4 laws of karma. Now let us get into the other form, which is karma and vipak. As I told you earlier, vipak means resultant or fruit. So karma is action and vipak, fruit or result, is its reaction. When we talk about action and reaction, you must have heard this a lot of time. We say every action has equal and opposite reaction. It is the law of universe. It was given by Newton, and it says that every action has equal and opposite reaction. So the same way, karma is your action and vipak is the reaction. Just as every object is accompanied by a shadow, even so every volitional activity is inevitably accompanied by its due effect. Karma is like the potential seed. Vipak could be likened to fruit arising from the tree, the effect or the result. Now, we see that Anisamsa and Adinaya are the leaves, flowers, and so forth that correspond to external differences such as health, sickness, and poverty. These are inevitable consequences which happen at the same time. Strictly speaking, both karma and vipak pertain to the mind. As karma may be good or bad, so may vipak. The fruit is good or bad. So when we're talking about equal action and equal reaction, what if we do perform good actions? Then the resultant or reaction has to be equal, isn't it? So the result or vipak is going to be good. And at the same time, if we perform bad actions or what are called unwholesome actions, then it is quite obvious that the vipak or resultant is going to be bad. When we talk about anisamsa, we say that they are the concomitant advantages. Material things such as prosperity, health, and longevity. When vipak's concomitant material things are disadvantageous, they are known as adinay. So we have on one hand anisamsa, which means concomitant advantages like material things such as prosperity, health, and longevity. And on the other hand, when vipak's concomitant material things are disadvantageous, they are known as adinay, full of wretchedness, and appear as poverty, ugliness, disease, short lifespan, and so forth. As we sow, we reap somewhere and sometime in life or in future birth. What we reap today, what we have sown either in the present or in the past. So, every action that we perform today might have its resultant in this life or in the future life. The resultants that we might be having today, sometimes you see people crying out loud and saying that what karma or actions did I do that I have to suffer? So it is not necessary that your actions are performed in this very life and you get the result in this very life. Maybe what you are bearing today, be it happiness or sadness, possibly could be the resultant of the actions that are performed in your past. So, coming to the next section, which is of good and bad karma. When we're talking about your actions and reaping its fruit, we need to pay emphasis on good and bad karma. Interestingly enough, the Buddhist answer to this question forces you to think and decide for yourself. Positive actions are defined as their results being a pleasant experience. Negative actions are defined by their unpleasant results. So the positive actions, as we all know, are defined by pleasant results. On the other hand, negative actions, as we all know, are defined by unpleasant results. The results mentioned here are unlikely to come immediately, so-called instant karma, considered rare. Instead, the karmic result may take lifetime to ripen. For example, if I steal an ice cream and enjoy eating it afterwards, the enjoyment is not karmic result of stealing the ice cream. It may be result of helping someone else long ago. The karmic result of stealing an ice cream is an unpleasant experience, such as being robbed. When we look at the causes of these karmas, we see that ignorance or avidya in Sanskrit and avidya in Pali, or not knowing things as they truly are, is the chief cause of karma. dependent on ignorance, arises activities. When we hear this, avidya pachay sankhar. Let me repeat it again for you. Avidya pachay sankhar. That means dependent on ignorance arises activities. And this is stated by the Sakyamuni Buddha in Pratitya Samutpad or Paticca Samupad, which is dependent origination. Associated with ignorance, all the craving tanha arises, and that is the root of karma. Evil actions are conditioned by these two causes. All good deeds of world, which means Puthujan, through associated with the three wholesome roots, lead to wholesome resultant. And these wholesome roots are generosity, which means alobh, goodwill, which means ados, and knowledge, which means amo. And these are nevertheless regarded as karma because the two roots of ignorance and craving are dormant in a person. The moral types of supramundane path consciousness, which means mag chit, is not regarded as karma because it tends to eradicate these two roots of craving and these two roots which are known as craving and ignorance. So, when we talk about the normal path, which is the path of the being, which means Puttu Janmak, we are pointing out to these roots of craving and ignorance. And even though our actions are led with generosity, goodwill, and knowledge, there's still certain sort of craving or ignorance. But when we're talking about supramundane path or path of consciousness, which is also known as Magchit, these are regarded as the ones that would eradicate the two root causes of ignorance and craving. Then comes the classification of karma. With respect to different functions, karma is classified into 4 kinds. So what are these 4 kinds of classification of karma? 1 is reproductive karma. According to the commentary, reproductive karma is that which produces mental aggregates and material aggregates at the moment of conception. The initial consciousness, which is termed as Pati Sandhi rebirth consciousness, is conditioned by this reproductive karma. So when we have reproductive karma, it is produced at the time of conception. Then, simultaneous with the arising of rebirth consciousness, there arise the body decade, sex decade, and base decade. Kai bhavatu dasak decade is equals to 10 factors. The body decade is composed of the elements of extension, the element of cohesion, and the element of heat, the element of motion. The 4 derivatives or upadan roop are color, odor, taste, and nutritive essence. Now, these 8 mahabhut are collectively called avinibhog roop, indivisible form or indivisible matter. Vitality or jivitindriya and body or kai. These avinibhog, 8 in number, plus jivitindriya, which is 1, and plus 1 kai is equal to 10. And these 10 are collectively called body decade or kai dasak. Now, when we talk about sex decade and base decade, they also consist of the first 9 sex or bhav and the seat of consciousness, which means vattu. respectively eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. From this, it is evident that the sex of a person is determined at the very conception of a being. So when we are talking about the scientific technology of deriving the sex of a being from the time it is conceived, the same thing is being said here, but this was done years ago. So with the advancement of all the scientific methods and technologies, we can determine it at present, but we're talking about years ago. The same thing was done without the help of any scientific advancement or technology. Now, let us come to the second karma, and that is supportive karma. That which comes near the reproductive karma and supports it. It is neither good nor bad, and it assists or maintains the action of reproductive karma. So first we have reproductive karma, then we have karma that is supportive karma. That supportive karma is the supportive karma of reproductive karma. It is neither good nor bad. After these two types of karma, we have obstructive karma or counteractive karma. When we talk about obstructive karma or counteractive karma, we see that unlike the former, it tends to weaken, interrupt, and retard the fruition of the reproductive karma. So obstructive means to obstruct something. So here what is obstructive karma doing is that it is weakening or interrupting and retarding the fruition of reproductive karma. Let us take for an example, a person born with good reproductive karma may be subject to various ailments, thus preventing him from enjoying the blissful result of his good actions. Is what is obstructive karma. So the same thing is there as obstructive karma, after which comes the destructive karma. Now, according to the law of the reproductive karma, or the potential energy of the reproductive karma could be nullified by a mere powerful opposing karma of the past, which, seeking an opportunity, may quite unexpectedly operate just as powerful counteractive force can obstruct the path of a flying arrow and bring it down to the ground. Such an action is called destructive karma, which is more effective than the previous two in that it is not only obstructive but also destroys the whole force. So this is destructive karma. Now the second thing that we are going to look here is interconnection of rebirth with karma. When we're talking about karma, we see that in Buddhism, along with karma, rebirth is an essential feature. According to Buddhism, living beings are part of cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, and karma helps determine the form of this rebirth. Individuals who accumulated more positive karma during their life will experience rebirth as a human being or enter a higher level of existence. As Buddhism teaches the existence of parallel planes similar to heaven and hell in other religions. Individuals who fail to live up to moral tenets of Buddhism are reborn as a lower animal or into a plane of suffering. Now, when we look at the four power of purification of karma, we see that the first one is power of the object. So what is the power of object? One should practice thinking of all sentient beings one may have heard. Traditionally, one remembers all sentient beings and the three jewels of refuge, which is Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, by generating compassion for all sentient beings and taking refuge. Second comes power of regret. This should not be senseless guilt or self-crimination, which are said to be useless emotional torture. What is intended here is to examine oneself and one's actions and to recognize that negative actions done in the past were very unwise. Then comes the power of promise, that is, to be willed enough that you are going to perform only good actions and not hurt any being. Then comes the power of practice. Basically, any positive action with a good motivation can be used as practice, and that is the power of practice. So here, when we look at the theory of karma, we see that the theory of karma defines our rebirth. It is a conscious linking of one birth to the other birth, and the kind of actions that we perform in our present life are ripened in the future as well as in the present life. And our present life may also be the resultant of the actions done in our past. So always remember this, that you need to be wholesome in your attitude, not just by actions, also by speech and thinking. Thank you.